Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Ensuring Justice for Immigrant Survivors. And thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm thrilled to report that over 270 of Sanctuary's friends and supporters are joining us this morning. As you will hear, the work of our amazing Immigration Intervention Project is very much in line with Sanctuary's mission, where we strive through our services to create a world in which freedom from gender violence is a basic human right. I want to take a moment to thank our host committee, Sunita Jeffrey, Marianne Mailman, Marcia Needleman, Michael Patrick, and Edward Sattler for helping us put together this program. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. We have a terrific group of people presenting to you today. Dorchen Leidholdt, Director of Sanctuary for Families Legal Center. Pooja Asnani, Director of the Immigration Intervention Project. Carolient Hardenbol, Senior Immigration Specialist at Sanctuary. Dandelet, a pro bono attorney from Cleary, Gottlieb, who also is a former alum of Sanctuary. Shai, our survivor speaker, unfortunately can't join us today. Her daughter is quite ill, and of course she has to focus on that rather than joining us. So we will miss her. It is my pleasure now to introduce Ana Oliveira, a great friend of Sanctuary's, a true leader in our movement. She is president and CEO of the New York Women's Foundation. Thank you, Ana, for joining us, and I'll turn this over to you for the panel.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. And thank you so much for having me. The New York Women's Foundation has had the opportunity to partner and support Sanctuary for Families over the years and looks forward to continuing that opportunity because the mission of Sanctuary and of healing and ending gender-based violence is supporting survivors, is critically important to the mission of the foundation as well. It's critically important to all of us, and it's critically important to what we want to see in the world. To me personally, today's conversation is of even more importance. As an immigrant, I completely identify on a personal level as well, in addition to my work level, with the importance of centering the lives of immigrant women and the needs that we have in terms of support, in terms of honoring our survivorship, and in terms of leveraging our wisdom and our power. So I thank Sanctuary so much for organizing today's conversation. We have a tight program, and I want to tell you what to do when you have questions. Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. There is a chance that one of our panelists might have answered them. Note them and hold them, please. If your question has not been answered, use the chat function, on the screen, the chat function, to send your questions to the panelists. We will try to answer all your questions, but if we don't have time to answer it, we will follow up with you later. Finally, you can also use the chat function to send a message to everyone that is on our call and meeting today. So I would like to begin with questions for our panelists. My first question goes to Dorchen. Dorchen, can you explain how this project began, the Immigration Intervention Project?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. So Ana, when Linda Lopez and I first arrived at Sanctuary in 1994, the Legal Center was just beginning to assist a smattering of survivors with their immigration legal needs. At that time, there was only one remedy designed for domestic violence survivors, the battered spouse waiver, and it was available only to a relatively small group of survivors, survivors who already had conditional resident status. Most immigrant survivors of domestic violence, including those married to US citizens or permanent residents, were at the mercy of their abusers, who wielded their roles as immigration sponsors as a weapon of power and control. 1994 was a watershed year for sanctuary and for survivors all over the country. That year, the Federal Violence Against Women Act was passed, and it included an immigration legal remedy for a far larger group of immigrant survivors. Those whose abusive US citizen spouses refused to sponsor them as a tactic of power and control. And I'm sorry that folks can't see me right now. I'm having some Zoom issues. And those whose spouses had withdrawn their sponsorship as a tactic of punishment and retaliation. Immigrant survivors who were married to US citizens or permanent residents after the VAWA self-petition remedy was passed were no longer at their abuser's mercy. They could now self-petition for immigration status. So now more and more immigrant survivors were seeking representation to free themselves from abuse and move onto the path to permanent resident status and citizenship. So Anna, in my first year at Sanctuary, I began to see first how transformative immigration legal representation is for individuals. And second, the kind of difference systems change advocacy can make for large numbers of the most marginalized survivors. So our Immigration Intervention Project, IIP, was created to carry out this dual mission through the dedicated service of gender-sensitive, trauma-informed staff and pro bono lawyers with immigration legal expertise. Within a few years, we were successfully tackling gender-based asylum claims in partnership with extraordinary pro bono lawyers like Fraga Del Rey's Lisa Koenig, and we were helping our clients access a game-changing new immigration remedy in the next reauthorization of VAWA, the U visa. In addition to serving survivors of intimate partner violence, we were also representing immigrant survivors of sex trafficking and what we at Sanctuary call culturally specific forms of domestic violence, like female genital mutilation, forced and child marriage, and honor-related violence. And so IIP was born.
Thank you so much. And I just want to appreciate, so nice to see you there, Dorchen. And I just want to comment that it's a bonus to see you, but the strength of your voice always comes through, regardless if we're able to see you personally there. So I just wanted to appreciate, as I'm moving to my second question, the competence and the understanding of the particular needs of the intersection of immigration and gender-based violence that you just spoke about. So Pooja, can you give us an overview of the immigration project? What kinds of cases do you handle? How many people are served?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. So the Immigration Intervention Project, or as we refer to ourselves, IIP, is the largest nonprofit immigration legal program for abuse victims in the United States. We have a team of 20 full-time staff members. And among other things, we provide free representation, advocacy, and information to thousands of foreign-born victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, and other forms of gender-based violence. We help our clients secure immigration status. We help protect them from detention and deportation when they are in removal proceedings. And we also help reunite our clients with their children abroad. So as you can see on the screen in front of you, we represent our clients in the full spectrum of immigration remedies, including removal defense, petitions for U non-immigrant status and T non-immigrant status, Violence Against Women Act petitions, also referred to as VAWA self-petitions, battered spouse waivers, petitions for special immigrant juvenile status, applications for asylum, employment authorization, green cards, and naturalization. And at IIP, we really focus our work on our clients and their legal and non-legal needs. We pride ourselves in providing trauma-informed legal representation, and our team is collectively fluent in Spanish, French, Mandarin, Hindi, Portuguese, Amharic, Russian, Italian, and Dutch. Additionally, we value our partnerships with the City Private Bar, And we recruit, train, and mentor other attorneys in order to ensure that the immigrant survivors throughout the city receive quality representation in their immigration matters. And you can see, you can get a sense of the volume of the cases that we work on, through the slide in front of you. So many of our clients, 71% of them at Sanctuary for Families are in fact immigrants, non-citizens, hailing from over 150 countries, primarily Mexico, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Honduras, China, just to name a few. In the last fiscal year, we served over 2,000 clients and helped over 104 people obtain legal permanent resident status, which, as you might imagine, is transformative for their lives.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Let me just highlight that we're having this conversation and coming out of several years of brutal immigration policies. So I wanted to commend the ability to be able to move this amount of legal cases successfully. So I want to turn to Carolyn. Carolyn, can you tell us what have been some of the major achievements over the past 15 years with IIPs?
Sure, be my great pleasure. And those were some impressive statistics you just heard. Hard data points quantifying our work product and products also of Pooja's great leadership of the project. And what I always do when I hear case numbers is that I actually envision all of the individuals, all thousands of them, each living a different story of transformation, of healing, of progress, of reuniting with families and loved ones across international borders, and of dangers and deportation averted. Our biggest achievement is, and that has always been, our ability to positively impact and do justice by each and every one of them in cases big and small. That's hard to capture in a set of data points, though we have those as well, a life that's safer and infinitely changed for the better. Doing good also means constantly checking and working to improve systems. In October of 2000, my first year at the Immigration Project, the Victim of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act was passed. It created the U visa, a visa for victims of crime, including gender violence crime, who cooperate with the investigation and prosecution of their abusers. So far, over 2,600 of our clients have benefited from it. But back then, there was no form, no regulations, no process for our clients to apply. But we didn't just leave it at that and waited for the instructions and a form to come out. And that, in fact, only happened 7 years later in 2007. But we developed a form for law enforcement to sign off on and started inundating immigration with applications. Just 2 years later, in 2002, sanctuary clients were the first in the country to be granted status under this statute. And we never stopped pushing for our clients, because around the same time, one of our clients from Mexico and her 2 undocumented children were the first in the country to get asylum for domestic violence. Today, they're all US citizens, and not just that. Her daughter is interning at Sanctuary's clinical department and about to graduate with an MSW. I congratulate you and greet you, Zaida, from this side of the screen. It's like coming full circle. In recent years, processing backlogs started increasing to currently over 5 years on some immigration case types. What do you tell a client without a stable home who struggles to make it on their own, but who you also know won't have a work permit for at least another 5 years? Mm-hmm. It prompted us to initiate several mass litigations in federal district court to get our clients interim work permits while their cases crawl to approval. And this very issue, interim work permits for applicants with pending humanitarian case types, is now actually included in the US Citizenship Act of 2021, which President Biden sent to Congress last week. None of this would have been possible without the guidance and collaboration of survivors and the hundreds of pro bono attorneys and law students who so generously share their skills, time, and kind attention to their clients' needs. Of the funders and donors who provide crucial support to make this happen. I know many of you are on this call. Your work is important on so many levels. Change may seem an impossible task, but it starts with all of us focusing our attention on what we can to do good. And that almost everything starts very, very small, so small that we often don't even notice it. But let's not forget, It is not just the legal victories that heal and transform. It's also the validation of a survivor's experiences and personhood that makes for a true and lasting victory. It is why we are so intentional about our commitment to compassionate, trauma-informed legal services and about always doing what we can to scale and leverage these. Reaching out to specifically under-resourced and underserved communities, for example, survivors living in areas outside the city where they are specifically isolated and in need of sanctuary service space we offer. Always trying to do better by more survivors, strengthening and expanding that sanctuary, and making sure that the sum of our services is always greater than its individual parts. Our clients lead the way and teach us where to focus. Our biggest achievement is to continue to build and expand the community of transformation and tangible change, and to fuel progress wherever and however we can.
That's so powerful, Carolyn. And I want to, hearing you, makes me want to turn to you, Dorchen, and ask you how this IIP fits into Sanctuary's overall legal center and within the whole agency. How is that integrated?
Yeah. Anna, to foster leadership and expertise, the Legal Center embraces a project model, and IIP is now the Legal Center's largest project. Over the years, it's been led by extraordinary leaders, several of whom are with us today: Sunita Rampersad, of course, the phenomenal Carolient, Hardenbol, and you've heard from our current IIP director, Pooja Asnani. And I just wanted to mention that IIP has benefited enormously from the contributions of other immigration legal experts, Stanley Mailman, whose memory we cherish, and Michael Patrick, chief among them. And as you've heard, legions of dedicated pro bono lawyers, so many of whom are with us today. Because immigrant survivors often have a wide array of urgent legal needs in other practice areas, IIP staff refer them to practitioners in our Courtroom Advocates Project, our Economic Justice Project, and our Family Law Projects for orders of protection, custody, child and spousal support, and divorce, and for representation in housing law and public benefits matters. Immigrant survivors who have been trafficked are served by our anti-trafficking initiative, and those who have been criminalized are served by our incarcerated gender violence survivor initiative. For clinical needs, we refer immigrant survivors to our adult and children's counselors and residential providers. Among them are brilliant clinicians like Mariama Diallo and Bushra Hussein with deep expertise in the specific practices of abuse and the systemic obstacles faced by immigrant survivors. And then there's our Economic Empowerment Project. It is extraordinarily valuable to our immigrant survivors once they have work authorization. It offers programming in both English and Spanish and helps our clients obtain the skills they need for living wage jobs. I mean, Sanctuary's holistic model helps all of our clients move from danger to safety, but for immigrant survivors who are almost invariably in a heightened situation of security and risk when they come to us, it's a lifeline.
Thank you. That's so important to understand the whole embracing of support and the whole leveraging of Sanctuary's programs for IIP as well. So I would like to see if we can get an example. So I wanted to turn to you, Kyle, as a pro bono attorney. Can you tell us about a specific case? What were the challenges in this case? What can you share with us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Before I get into it, let me just say that I'm going to give some disturbing details about the violence that my client suffered. So I just want to give people an opportunity to either tune me out or mute me if they're sensitive to these topics. But when I was a first-year litigation associate, I began representing a young Pakistani woman in her removal proceedings. And to protect her privacy and to simplify things, I'm going to call her Sophia, which is not her actual name. But throughout her life, Sophia suffered just horrific physical and psychological abuse by her father and her older brothers. And as she got older, the men in the family made plans for her to go back to Pakistan so she could undergo quote unquote virginity testing. And they told her, if you pass the test, you will be married to your cousin, which is something that she didn't want. And they said that if she failed the test, they would subject her to an honor killing. So facing this prospect, Sophia decided to run away from home. And she took an overnight bus to New York City where she knew absolutely no one. She moved into a shelter, and she was eventually connected with Sanctuary for Families, who then referred the case to us at Cleary. And then about a year after we started working with her, her family found her in New York City. They abducted her, they brought her back to Pakistan, and they basically did everything that they threatened they would do. They locked her in a small room. They repeatedly beat her to the point of unconsciousness. They broke her nose, and they finalized her forced marriage. And at some point, while she was locked in that room, a cleaning lady let her use her cell phone, and she called me. And getting that call was probably the most difficult thing that I have ever experienced and will ever experience in my professional life. But we were eventually able to get the State Department to agree that if we could get Sophia to a US embassy, they would let her in the doors. So that's what we did. Through, I would say, a series of miracles, we were able to coordinate her escape from her family, which was complicated by the fact that she was actually being held on a naval base in Pakistan. We got her to the US embassy, and then the US government granted her humanitarian parole so that she could come back into the country, and then she was later granted asylum. And I mentioned that case in particular because I think that it illustrates a couple of larger points. First of all, Sophia's case actually took place during the Obama administration. And the reason I point that out is because there has been so much necessary and warranted focus on the fear and the hardship that immigrants face during the Trump administration that I think it can be easy to forget that people like Sophia needed our help before Donald Trump, and they need our help today. And not only do they need our help today, but I would actually argue that they need it now more than ever. In 2018 and 2021, the Trump administration issued two separate decisions in a case called Matter of AB. And those decisions make cases like Sophia's much, much harder to win. So had she been abducted today, I think that chances are very good that our government, the US government, would actually do to her what her father and brothers did many years ago, which is to forcibly remove her to Pakistan, where she would be seriously harmed or even killed. And if I could, the last thing I want to say about her case briefly is that it shows the power of pro bono work and the benefits of doing it with an organization like Sanctuary for Families. Even before she was abducted, as I said, Sophia was very young. She was very severely traumatized. She was in need of therapy, case management, and other intensive services. We at my law firm obviously couldn't provide those services to her. And honestly, I think we would struggle to even find them for her. But Sanctuary provided Sophia with everything she needed, which made our jobs a lot easier. And because of her, I became an immigration attorney. So for those of you who are at law firms or in law school thinking about doing pro bono work with Sanctuary, I would say to you, do it and do it today. As Pooja, I think, understated, you and your client will get all of the support you need. It's such a wonderful team. And in my opinion, there is truly no greater privilege as an attorney than helping someone to turn their past pain and their past suffering into a tool for something good, which is legalizing their status and finding safety.
Thank you, Kyle. This is exceedingly inspiring and moving. And thank you for the work that you did and are doing.
Thank you.
Let me come back to you, Carolyn, and ask you, why is this type of work important to be present in a domestic violence, anti-domestic violence agency?
Yeah, I mean, as you've heard Dorchen speak about our holistic services, and Kyle also highlighted with a specific case, it's very hard to follow their acts, but I think it also illustrates that at Sanctuary, our clients always lead the way. Their needs are our command. Most immigration clients use an average of about 4 other sanctuary services, all supporting them in their journey to safety and stability. Like you've heard about them: adult counseling, child counseling, shelter, economic empowerment services, help navigating complex insurance and benefit systems, housing advocacy, homeless prevention, financial grants, and then of course, broad spectrum legal services as well. This interconnected web of services is initiated and suggested by the very women, men, boys, and girls we assist. They journey to safety from places all around the world. And often, again, once they're here, when escaping abusers and traffickers. In our offices around the city, and now virtually, they find a true sanctuary and a family of sorts, a place where their courage and perseverance meets our expertise. It's in teamwork and in compassionate collaboration that we extend our helping hand, our clients always central to everything we do. Not in a static, pre-programmed way, but always organically addressing the specific questions they have. I had never worked on an international abduction case involving an undocumented Mexican client who was lured by the US citizen father of her child to China, and once there, robbed of her child. But that was the issue our client needed help with. Find and reunite me with my daughter and get us back to the United States. That's what she asked us. Working with state, federal, and international law enforcement agency, we reunited them and helped them return to the United States. I'd also never gotten anyone an emergency visa for a kidney transplant, but that's what we were able to do for the preteen daughter of one of our trafficking clients. It was urgent, we were told, very urgent, as there were serious concerns that the girl was being recruited into prostitution in Venezuela, where she had been living with her grandmother. We closely collaborated with the chief nephrologist at NYU Medical, who made sure that treatment could be started the minute she arrived from Venezuela. How do you even capture the true meaning of interventions like these? Victorious transformations that didn't just start with one issue or just one question, and that certainly also did not end with just one legal decision, but which involved a host of other equally urgent legal and non-legal services. What makes it so humbling for me to work at Sanctuary is that we leave no stone unturned. That's sort of an unwritten rule. Our commitment to the whole person and, where possible, the family unit. We do all this in a way that is not just achievable, but accessible even for the poorest client, as we secure a financial grant to cover expenses that they cannot. In the abduction case, it was hotel expenses and airfare. But in other cases, that's legal fees or fees for mandatory background checks, or a grant for a uniform to start a job as a home health aide after they get their first work permit, or for childcare as our client needs to appear in court. It's in the who and all that we bring together to help our clients achieve safety and stability on their terms. That's exactly where you will find us.
Thank you. Thank you. Pooja, I have 2 last questions for you. Let me ask the first one. The first one is about the present. How do you see the biggest challenges that are facing Sanctuary and its clients now in the present?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So as Kyle alluded to, the clients that we serve belong to communities that have been deliberately targeted by cruel and inhumane immigration policies in the past 4 years that have been effectuated through a slew of executive orders, presidential memoranda, agency rulemaking, and even quotas that have been imposed on immigration judges. This multi-front attack has disproportionately and excessively harmed immigrant survivors of violence and really continues to sow fear and uncertainty within these communities. I think it bears noting that many of these harmful policies that have been enacted during these past 4 years have just not been simply undone with the transition to the new administration. We are really left with their remnants, including heightened scrutiny on humanitarian applications, increased delays in the adjudication of cases, increased denials of immigration remedies based on discretion of the individual officer that's looking at the application. And in the case of asylum, as Kyle explained to you, a revision of asylum law that has effectively excluded domestic violence survivors from eligibility. I think it's worth noting that the extent to which this revision of asylum law has taken place in the past 4 years. So you may have heard about or read in the news about the matter of AB decision, which made it impossible, very, very difficult for domestic violence survivors to obtain asylum. And additionally, I think something that was probably less covered was a series of rules, a sweeping set of rules that were actually set to go into effect on January 11th of this year that would have made it virtually impossible for someone to get asylum based on domestic violence or anything relating to gender. And at Sanctuary for Families, as you imagine, these are precisely the cases we've been working on since the beginning, as you heard Dorchen and Carolient talk about. And these include cases for women or girls who fear female genital mutilation, forced marriage cases, forced sterilization cases, domestic violence, and also cases of individuals persecuted for their gender or sexual orientation. And unfortunately, these rules cannot just be undone with a simple stroke of a pen by executive order. And there is currently pending litigation before the District Court of DC. So, excuse me. This rule and other policies that I mentioned are just tips of the enormous iceberg of many changes on all levels of processing and administering the immigration system that have been faced by our clients. And though they sometimes seem very technical, and I think hence the reason why many of these went unnoticed, they really were designed to create a climate of confusion and fear. They were created to deter applications, delay adjudication, deny relief, and overall discourage immigrant survivors from coming forward. I really think of this tactic, and it became increasingly clear to me throughout the past 4 years that it really was a strategy of death by 1,000 cuts. And so these destructive policies, coupled with the epidemic, have further harmed undocumented immigrants, who were already relegated in many ways to the margins of society. And what the pandemic, I think, has laid bare for many of us is that more than 5 million of our essential workers, this really the center, the core of our society, don't have permanent status. And this includes many of our clients who are authorized to work, but who don't have status, permanent status. Their case is pending for 5 years and sometimes even more. They work as home health aides and nurses, food service workers, and school aides. Just think about that for a moment. Someone who is essential and also at the same time deportable. Imagine that you've been here for decades and yet you're unable to access unemployment benefits, food stamps, or housing assistance during a pandemic. Additionally, I think it's worth highlighting that with the closing of the US-Mexico border to asylum seekers in the past few years, we now have a situation where more than 20,000 individuals, including children and families, many of whom are fleeing violence, persecution, and abuse, and really seeking a path to safety and sanctuary, are waiting in what are effectively refugee tents across the border in many towns in Mexico. They're waiting for simply the opportunity to tell someone in the United States, I am afraid to return, I wish to seek asylum. And so we hope in the coming months that these individuals will be afforded their rights under international and US law to seek asylum protections from the United States. And we hope that Sanctuary for Families can play a crucial role in helping these individuals obtain this protection. Immigrants who flee persecution and seek safety from abuse and violence haven't had the law on their side to rebuild their lives in any meaningful way. And if you think about it, the United States is a country of immigrants, but over the past decades, immigration laws have severely lagged behind the reality of immigration and the experience of an immigrant. And it has resulted in 11 million documented people that you hear about, and which has become evidently clear during this past year that we need to do more to protect them.
So when I hear you talk about undoubtedly so much of the injustices and burdens of recent immigration policies have been borne by women, fleeing situations of abuse or violence, seeking sanctuary, as you said. So when we look a little bit in the near future, and we look at the Biden administration, what should we have? Should we have a lot of hope? Should we expect? You indicated that things don't change so quickly, but what is it that we should be expecting?
Well, I think there are many reasons to be hopeful. We are at the dawn of a new day. And with this administration, a lot is happening on the topic of immigration, which many of you might be reading about in the news. There have been sweeping statements about immigration reform and actually specific proposals that have been introduced. And then there's pending litigation in various areas of immigration law, including the public charge, border policies, enforcement, and the travel bans. You've probably heard of the US Citizenship Act, which was introduced just this last Thursday. It's quite commonsensical in its approach, it's in its humane approach. And at the same time, all that it envisions is actually quite significant and very long overdue. So, with this background in the US Citizenship Act, which the president introduced to Congress last week, I'll try to summarize some highlights that are really pertinent to the population that we serve. The bill is over 350 pages long, and there's lots of great changes, some of which I'll highlight today. But I'll just note for you that there is one sort of jarring piece that's missing from this bill. The bill specifically does not propose any concrete wording to ensure relief for people fleeing persecution from their country of origin. And as we've already talked about, that is direly needed in this time when asylum protections have been so massively dismantled. So that's just hopefully something that that more advocacy can be done on in the coming months. But I will highlight for you and emphasize some of the positive developments that have been proposed in this bill. So there are a few big areas. So I'll talk about the legalization piece of the bill, which creates legal status and a path to a green card for folks who've been in the United States for a while. And specifically, the cutoff is for people who've been in the United States before January of this year. And so this is, this would be a wonderful opportunity. There are, exceptions relating to criminal and security considerations, but generally it would involve a pathway to legalization. And this would greatly benefit our clients also, who for many of the reasons we've already discussed and because of many of the administrative hurdles that I've touched on, are not able to access the humanitarian remedies that they might be eligible for. So there's a related provision to ensure green cards additionally for Dreamers, which is a population of young people who came to the United States when they were under the age of 16 through no fault of their own. And we're currently representing approximately 200 clients who have this status. And so this would allow them the opportunity to make permanent their status in the United States, to live and work and form stable lives and set roots down in the United States. And so I'll move to the second sort of big theme and set of proposals, which is called Immigration Courts, Family Values, and Vulnerable Individuals, which is, as you might imagine, very pertinent for us and the work that we do. One very important provision, proposed provision, is to increase the annual number of U visas from 10,000 a year to 30,000 a year. This is really important for our clients. It might sound, sort of technical and maybe even trivial, but just to give you a sense, we have represented over 2,700 clients who've gotten U visas. U visas are available to people who've been the victim of crimes and who've cooperated and helped the US government investigate or prosecute these crimes. And what we have seen over the years is there are many, 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 many more people who are eligible for this humanitarian visa than are available visas in a given year. And that this has resulted in extreme lags. To give you a sense of the impact, if you were to file a U visa today, you would likely not expect a decision for another 5 to 10 years, during which time you cannot work, you don't have work authorization, you cannot access public benefits. You've assisted the United States government, and you are left in this state of limbo where you are really unprotected. So, which brings me to the other proposal in this bill, which is allowing for interim work permits, which allows vulnerable immigrants, including U visa petitioners as well as T visa petitioners, to obtain work authorization while they're waiting years and years and years for these applications to be adjudicated. And then finally, there is another really interesting proposal is to ensure that that there's a fund to provide to provide counsel to children, disabled immigrants, and survivors of abuse or violence. I think many of you on this call probably know this, but there's no right to counsel in immigration proceedings, which is, in my opinion, a gap, a very, very significant gap in how we administer our immigration system. And then finally, there's a category called promotion of family reunification, which extends benefits to permanent partners of applicants. This is of crucial importance for the LGBTQ community, especially in countries where marriage is not an option. And so there's a rapidly growing practice area for more individuals seeking this type of persecution to obtain asylum and other protections. And something that would also be very important for our clients and that might be overlooked is it's an area that would of immigration reform that would really meaningfully allow our clients to rebuild their lives. They would be able to get in-state tuition, go to school, have the support of family and loved ones. And so we think that this would really add another layer of benefits that would be available to immigrant survivors. So the eternal question, what will this turn into lasting legislative reform? Truthfully, it is too early to say. We all remain hopeful and optimistic, and we do believe that fierce and focused advocacy is needed. And like we've done over the past decades under Carolien's leadership and the leaders of IIP that came before us, we will continue to collaborate with our national partner organizations around the country, including the Tahiri Justice Center, where a former IIP attorney will soon be the executive director, Archie Piatti. We'll also focus our efforts on New York senators and representatives. This is really an important piece of legislation that needs Congress to act on it. It is not, as I mentioned earlier, this is not going to get done simply by the signing of executive orders or through agency rulemaking. We really need Congress to act on this. And so this is where all of you can step in and help. Please urge your representative to get to work, to let them know that this is an issue you deeply care about, and know that no action is too small or too insignificant, as this is actually how change happens. And as you push for reform, be sure to let everyone you know that while all of these policies sound really wonderful and uplifting, it's not actually the law yet. And so it's important that people know that none of these policies have gone into legal effect. And it's important for folks to know that, especially out in immigrant communities, so they're not getting defrauded by people who are charging them money to help them get this type of relief. So I'll end there. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to talk more about these issues.
Thank you so much, Pooja. And let me thank Pooja, Dorchen, Carolient, and Kyle for the panel. And let me turn it over to Lisa now.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna. And thank you everyone for that really, really inspiring discussion. As I just put in the chat, now is the time for everyone to ask questions. We already have one that's incredibly important, really on two fronts. Pooja, I think this is probably one for you. This is someone who's asking how someone who is in need of help can access our services. And the particular issue is that she has been suffering psychological abuse, but not physical abuse, and is afraid to seek assistance because she can't prove the abuse. So that's critical, I think, on two fronts.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. So I think I'll start by addressing the second part of your question, which is about the psychological abuse. I think it's sometimes a misconception, and we see this with our clients as well, But, oh, you know, I was never hit, you know, they never hit me or they never battered me. And so, you know, I'm not experiencing domestic abuse. And we know through years of work on this, that that is not accurate. Psychological abuse is absolutely a form of domestic violence, and it's often accompanied by related harms that involve control, abuse, and power and control over the victim. As to how people can reach us, we have offices throughout the city in various boroughs. So we are currently in Brooklyn, Manhattan, the Bronx, and Queens, and we are located at the family justice centers in those counties, in those boroughs. Additionally, we have a website. People are able to call our hotline and access our services that way. And additionally, you can Google us and, you know, try and find a number. And if nothing else, I'm happy to provide my email address. If someone wants to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to provide that contact. So there are a number of ways in which people can access us and can reach us.
Great, super terrific, Pooja. The second question is maybe, Carolien, this is for you, highlighting, as was really evident in the panel, that our immigrant clients are living in some very isolated communities and might not have easy access. So the question is, what sort of outreach are we doing to make sure that we're reaching the survivors that can benefit from this help?
Yeah, I love that question. That's a question very near to my heart, because that is something we focus on all the time, and also a work in constant progress, because there are always more people to be connected to services and to be informed about their rights, mostly because the connection to services first goes to informing them about the eligibilities and possibilities, and for them to make an informed decision. That's basically our goal. We have very strong connections with organizations, institutions, and agencies that directly interface, connect with possible clients or survivors. So you need to think about, for example, emergency rooms, OBGYN departments in hospitals where women particularly may go for prenatal care. We also work with religious institutions, of course, all the community-based organizations around the state, basically, or even in the tri-state area, because we get clients referred to us also from outside of New York City. So it's a constant plotting and planning of how to develop your outreach such that you can reach as many people as possible, thinking about particular areas that may be underserved. For example, migrant farm worker communities, especially. Also, we have close ties also on eastern end of Long Island, where I've worked also with day laborers organizations, also to know about our services. So it's both to know about what we do, what we're able to do, and to also go out there. And then I think lastly, what is very important is the fact that clients or individuals we have touched also often become ambassadors for us. And the word of mouth effect is also enormous. And I think ultimately that may be the most effective outreach, even though, that's very organic also, but I think that defines us. Because then also the previous clients or individuals who have been touched can speak in a very informed way about who we are, and that we can in fact be trusted with real free services, and this is not some sort of scam. So it's very multifaceted. If you're asking because you're very interested for us to connect with a particular community you're working with, please do also. I can also put my email in the chat, but very happy to follow up on that.
Great, thanks, Carolien. The next question is, I know we seem to have a lot of pro bono attorneys in the audience, which is amazing. And Kyle, maybe you can field this question, since you've been on both sides, the pro bono attorney and on staff at Sanctuary, and now running a pro bono project at a major law firm. Just how do we leverage pro bono support? And if an attorney is out there and wants to get involved in this work, how can that person get involved?
Yeah, actually, I would defer to you. I'm not sure if there are attorneys who want to work with sanctuary for families, who the best person to reach out to is, or how to make that happen. But for people who are at law firms, you would go to your pro bono coordinator, whoever that person is, and express an interest. Each law firm is a little bit different. Um, but what I would say is that, as I said before, I encourage everybody to do this type of work, even if you have no immigration experience. When you start working on a new matter with Sanctuary for Families, they will provide you with the training materials you need, and you'll also be assigned an attorney to sort of go to with questions and to sort of supervise the case. So you will have all the support that you need. And Lisa, I defer to you as to where people go when they want to make that connection to Sanctuary.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, maybe Pooja, do you want to talk a little bit too? I also wanted to underscore how we depend on pro bono support and how the enormous generosity from the private bar allows us to serve many, many more clients than we otherwise would be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as you heard Kyle so eloquently talk about earlier, so much of our work is dependent on the support and assistance of pro bono attorneys. We work with hundreds of pro bono attorneys every year. And for anyone who's interested in reaching out, in working with us, in volunteering, you can feel free to email me. We also have a pro bono coordinator. She's the director of our pro bono program, and her name is Nicole Fiddler. I suspect that if you are at a law firm, someone at your firm might already know who she is, but I'm also happy to add her name into the chat box. I hope she's okay with me sharing it, but she's definitely, I think so. I mean, she's sort of the coordinator for our pro bono work, and you can feel free to reach out to her or to me and Caroline as well, if that's okay, Caroline. All of us are happy to chat with any of you about pro bono work.
Terrific. Thanks, Pooja. I think we have time for two more questions. The first is, I think that's something that's confusing for a lot of people, and that is the Violence Against Women Act and the fact that it's up for reauthorization and what exactly that means, whether or not the remedies in the statute are on hold, or how is that reauthorization impacting relief that's available at the federal level for immigrant survivors. And maybe Pooja or Carolene, you want to take that?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the reauthorization is something that needs to happen every few years. I don't remember how many exactly, and it has not been reauthorized in 2020, but that has not impacted existing protections and provisions under the Act. Those are all still in effect. What has been stalled by it's not being authorized is newer proposals that would further advance the goals behind the Violence Against Women Act. So those include, various new programs, such as a rape, providing additional funding for rape prevention and education programs, expanding housing protection, creating programs to help reduce dating violence, and so on. And so these have been stalled, which is really unfortunate that our Senate can't act on this. But all of the sort of remedies that you've heard us talking about of the work that we do that has sprung from the Violence Against Women Act are all still in effect.
Great, thank you, Pooja. So our last question, I think I'll address. This is near and dear to my heart as the person who oversees development at Sanctuary, is just how is this project funded, and how can we help? So you've heard the incredible impact that these attorneys and our work with the pro bonos have. This is the initiative is about a $2 million initiative in terms of covering salaries and covering overhead, including filing fees, support that we give to our clients. So it's not an insignificant budget. About 64% comes from public funding sources. But as those of you in the nonprofit space know, public funding never covers your full cost in terms of what you're incurring. And there's about $700,000 that we need to raise from private sources. So we rely on foundations, we rely on individuals. I will note that we've seen a little bit of a disturbing trend among foundations that are pulling back from direct services. And in fact, one foundation really told us that, the crisis is over. So we're closing up our, our funding streams for this work. So, and I hope you all, as you've heard this morning, the crisis is so not over, and the crisis of violence for immigrant survivors is never over. So this work really is just so critically important. So again, we welcome your support. If any of you are connected to foundations where this is a strategic priority, we welcome that. I want to make sure I acknowledge Anna. The New York Women's Foundation has been incredibly supportive of this work and of Sanctuary overall. So again, we need support to be able to do this work and to be able to hear help the survivors that you've heard about this morning. So Anna, I'm going to turn it over to you, I think, to close this out.
Actually, I think it's me, but happy to
It's
hear from
Judy.
Anna as well. First, thank you, Anna, and you'll get a separate thank you for something that happened today through the Women's Foundation to help Sanctuary. Thank you for your leadership, for your support, and of course, for moderating this terrific panel. And to the panelists, thank you not just for a terrific presentation today, but for your work and commitment to our immigrant clients. And to our audience, thanks for listening. Thanks for being our supporters and friends, and have a good day. Hope to see you all in person someday soon.